Right now, there's a real chance you're either drinking, hungover, or already thinking about your next one. No judgment. I'm not your dad. And here's the part that should actually get you. You didn't pick that habit up from a bartender, a brewery, or your uncle at Thanksgiving. You inherited it from an ancestor who wasn't even human yet. Older than writing, older than farming, older than your species having a name for itself. In 2015, a paleogeneticist named Matthew Kerrigan did something genuinely strange. He resurrected an extinct gene in a lab just to test it. What he found rewired the entire timeline of why your Friday night exists. One mutation, roughly 10 million years ago, made your ancestors' bodies 40 times better at processing alcohol. 40 times. One mutation. So here's the actual question this video answers. If your body was built to want this 10 million years before anyone existed to brew it on purpose, what was it actually built to drink first? Let's go find out. Grab a drink. It's research now.
10 million years before the first beer. Picture your ancestors, long before anything close to human, moving down out of the trees, onto the forest floor, where the fruit was. But fruit on the ground doesn't stay fresh. Sugar breaks down. Wild yeast moves in. Within days, that fruit is fermenting, turning its sugar into ethanol, alcohol, manufacturing itself for free all over the forest floor. Any primate eating that fruit was also eating alcohol, so the ones who could tolerate it had an advantage. More food available, less competition for it. That's exactly what Kerrigan's gene study found proof of. He rebuilt the gene, called ADH4, from primate DNA going back 70 million years, and found the single mutation that changed everything, roughly 10 million years ago. Not folklore. A gene resurrected in a lab and tested. But here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. This isn't just an ancient story. In 2015, researchers led by Kimberly Hawkins spent 17 years watching wild chimps in Guinea and found them repeatedly drinking fermented raffia palm sap, sap that tested at nearly 7% alcohol, stronger than most beer. And they weren't just drinking it, they built a tool for it, a leaf folded like a sponge specifically to soak up more sap. One individual drank roughly 85 milliliters of pure alcohol in one sitting, approximately a full bottle of wine, with actual visible signs of drunkenness documented afterward. So, somewhere in West Africa, right now, there is a wild animal that built a tool specifically to get a drink, which means your ancestors weren't the first primate to want alcohol. They were just the first to eventually stop waiting for the forest floor to make it for them. That jump, from finding alcohol to actually making it, took millions of years. But when it finally happened, it happened somewhere nobody expected. Not a farm, not a village, a cave. The cave that brewed before it farmed. In 2018, archaeologists excavating Raqefet Cave near Haifa, Israel, made a discovery that quietly rewrote a settled timeline. Inside, stone mortars carved directly into the cave floor, belonging to hunter-gatherers called the Natufians, roughly 13,000 years ago. Researchers analyzed the residue left inside. Wheat and barley, deliberately soaked, germinated, left to ferment. That's beer, brewed in a cave 13,000 years ago. Here's why that matters more than it sounds like it should. The Natufians were not farmers. They hadn't invented agriculture yet, still collecting wild grain by hand, hunting for meat. They didn't grow the barley, they found it. But brewing with it mattered enough that they figured it out anyway, before they'd even figured out farming. The old story runs in a tidy order. Settle down, invent farming, build villages, then discover fermentation. Raqefet Cave says that order is backwards. These people were brewing while still nomadic, and they weren't the only ones. About 1,000 years later, southeastern Turkey, someone built something enormous. Göbekli Tepe. Massive stone pillars, some over 10 tons, arranged in deliberate circles, carved with animals, built before farming, before pottery, before a single permanent home existed anywhere nearby. These were still hunter-gatherers. For years, archaeologists couldn't explain why nomads would drag 10-ton stones up a hill and carve them with precision. What was worth that much effort? Then they found large stone vats at the site. Residue inside showed chemical traces of fermented grain. Not small amounts, enough for a serious crowd. So the leading theory now is genuinely strange to sit with. Hunter-gatherers may have organized one of the first big construction projects in history specifically so people would have somewhere to gather and drink together. A monument built on a hangover. Here's the theory that follows from the leading expert in this field. Archaeochemist Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania has spent decades arguing something that flips the usual story of civilization on its head. Humans, he argues, didn't start farming to make bread, they started farming to make beer. His reasoning holds up. Bread requires grinding grain, kneading, baking, a genuinely complex process. Beer is almost embarrassingly simple. Soak grain in water, walk away. Let wild yeast do the rest. The motivation to keep drinking may have simply beaten the motivation to eat the same grain in a different shape. To be fair, not every archaeologist agrees this was the primary driver. Some argue bread and beer developed side by side. That pushback is fair, but even skeptics agree on the headline detail. Wherever people farmed grain early, they were also almost immediately brewing with it, which means the people at Göbekli Tepe had no idea what they were actually starting. As far as they knew, they were just building a place to feast a few times a year. They had no way of knowing the demand for a reliable drink might help push their descendants into permanent farming, permanent villages, permanent cities. A hangover, loosely speaking, may have built civilization. Now, remember that question from the start of this video? The oldest deliberate, on-purpose alcohol recipe ever found. By around 7000 BCE, a Neolithic village called Jiahu in central China gives us the answer. And it's not what anyone expects. Archaeologists found pottery jars there holding residue from a fermented drink, made from rice and honey and grapes and hawthorn berries. All four deliberately combined in the same batch. That's not stumbling onto fermented grain by accident. That's a recipe, a specific blend chosen on purpose, roughly 9,000 years ago, the oldest confirmed alcoholic recipe ever found anywhere on Earth. Whoever made that first batch knew exactly what they were doing. And from that point forward, alcohol didn't just tag along with civilization, it got fully absorbed into it. Nowhere more completely than one civilization where beer wasn't a treat on the side, it was your actual paycheck. A paycheck you could drink. By ancient Egypt, beer wasn't brewed for fun on the side. It was infrastructure. The laborers who built the pyramids were paid partly in beer, roughly 4 to 5 liters per person per day. Not a bonus, their actual wage. And there was a good reason. Water straight from the Nile was often contaminated, risky to drink. Beer, because of the brewing process, was considerably safer, so it wasn't just payment, it was also quietly the water filter. The fermentation packed in real calories too, which mattered for someone hauling limestone across the desert all day. So beer in ancient Egypt wasn't just a drink, it was a paycheck, it was a water filter, and on top of both, considered a literal gift from the god Osiris, showing up in temple offerings, burial rituals, medical prescriptions for stomach problems. 1 cup, quietly doing the job of a salary, a filter, a meal, and a prayer all at once. So here's the actual shape of this story. 10 million years ago, one gene mutation quietly built the want into your ancestor's body before anyone existed to satisfy it on purpose. That chimpanzee from the start of this video is living proof the want was never uniquely human. 13,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers were brewing before they'd even figured out farming. 11,000 years ago, that same want may have helped drag 10-ton stones up a hill in Turkey. 9,000 years ago, someone in China wrote the first known recipe for it. 4,500 years ago, an entire empire ran its economy through it. Alcohol didn't arrive after civilization was built. There's a genuine argument it's one of the reasons civilization got built at all. Here's a real question. I'd honestly love your answer. Which part actually got you more? The wild chimpanzee that built a tool to get drunk, or the fact that Göbekli Tepe might be the world's oldest bar? Tell me down in the comments, I actually read them. And if this changed how you'll look at your next drink, tap like and subscribe before you go. So tonight, whenever you pour whatever you're about to pour, you're not doing something your species picked up recently. You're running a 10-million-year-old program in a body built for exactly this, long before there was a word for any of it. And tomorrow morning, when your head reminds you that you ran that program a little too enthusiastically, that's not bad luck. That's just the oldest bill in your species finally coming due.